special guest this evening is Salini Teri Apodaca, and I hope I pronounced that right, but she'll clarify. Salini is a healer, shaman, author, counselor, and TV show host of the show Heal Yourself Now on Naturally Better TV and radio host of Emerging from the Matrix in intentionradio.com. Salini has a long career as a spiritual teacher, author, and Reiki master, working with energy, counseling, and soul healing to heal trauma, chronic illness, addictions, emotional blockages, ritual abuse, sexual abuse, ancient karma, mental programming, and many other conditions brought to her. She grew up in California, where she was secretly ritually abused by Masons and taken into the MK Ultra trauma-based mind control sex slavery program created by Dr. Josef Mengele. And trained to be a beta sex kitten sex slave, she was given further training in heightened and mental abilities to be used at NASA and other government projects as a human computer or communicator. Salini was born with advanced healing gifts and spiritual awareness. Her mother, who was not part of the trauma-based program, guided Salini to healers, spiritual teachers, masters, and other highly advanced spiritual individuals who assisted her to awaken her healing gifts and initiated her into Reiki and many other spiritual disciplines. This early spiritual training saved Salini's life and placed her onto her true life path, healing, spiritual awakening, truth speaking, and breaking the matrix in preparation for the ascension of planet Earth. Salini's new book, Emerging from the Matrix, tells her story of healing herself from near death and illness to her resurrection and triumph over evil. She details a step-by-step process of healing and awakening to assist everyone stepping out of the matrix and into their higher selves. Excuse me. And her book is now available online at Hay House, Amazon, and Barnes & Noble. And Salini is available for individual consultations, healing, and or counseling sessions, workshops, speaking engagements, or Skype consultations. And her Skype address, excuse me, I think she wants me to give this out, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. And clarify me if I'm not. Maybe I won't. I'll wait till we get a hold of her, so we make sure that we do that. But her website is www.emergingfromthematrix.com, and I can put some links into her radio shows as well. And please, and of course her book, www.emergingfromthematrix.com. And Salini, please welcome Salini to the show this evening. I hope I said your name right. I believe I did.
Yeah, that's fine. Just call me Salini. It's too hard to remember all the rest of it.
I don't know why everybody has a problem with that. It's beautiful, though. I love it.
It's easy. Apodaca. It's not too hard. But that's okay. It's no big deal.
Thank you. Thanks for the clarification. Well, welcome.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you on, and you're just a wellspring of so much information and so much experience. So let's kind of give everybody a rundown insofar as your book, Emerging from the Matrix, and how you got involved in writing this book. What year did you start writing it?
Well, this might shock everybody, but I started writing it in 1994. I started waking up to the Matrix way a long time ago, but, I didn't get the full picture right at first because I was still emerging from my own personal trauma and matrix of mind control. But I had several experiences in a row. Chiefly, my Reiki mastership really catapulted me into my healing when I became a Reiki master. And I began remembering. And then soon after that, I started having experiences with, black operations and having those people come around. And I started to wonder, what the heck's happening here? Why am I experiencing this? And then soon after, I realized that I had unusual information. I didn't know how many people had this information. Back then it was scarier to talk about it. So I didn't talk about it with a lot of people, but I started writing the book. And as I wrote the book, even more came forward. So it became a long process because I had to stop. I had breast cancer. I had several crises occurred in there. And so I had to set it aside for a while.
Mm-hmm. Right. And when you became a Reiki master, now it sounds like you were detoxifying and all of these memories were unraveling. Is that what happened?
Yes. Since I was trauma-based mind control, the memories were suppressed and compartmentalized. And they happened very early. So it was hard to remember. I just knew that I didn't feel good and I was in fear of my father and things didn't feel right. My parents were drinking too much and a lot of things were going on. So I didn't remember specifically until I was about 20 when I had my first memories.
Wow.
But it was another 20 years before the rest of it came out.
Mm-hmm.
So, because, I had too many other life responsibilities and I was working full time and going to school and various other things. So about the time I became a Reiki master was when it all burst out. Mm-hmm. And it actually came out at second level Reiki first, where I had a lot of emotional releases and healing. And I felt traumatized and I didn't know why. And then as a Reiki master, I was strong enough to finally face what really happened to me.
Wow, that's incredible. And I like Reiki very, very much. And it makes sense at that second level because that's the emotional mental body. So that would make a lot of sense. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
When you talk about the black operations and the people coming around, who were these people? Were they physically coming around?
There's specifically one thing that happened. I can't really go into too many details of who was around me because some of these people are still alive, so
Okay.
I can't talk about those people. But there was an incident I had. I became a drug and alcohol counselor, among other things. I've had several different modalities of healing. I'm a body worker, a masseuse, a counselor, a healer. I was a colon hydrotherapist. So I, trained myself in a lot of different areas.
Mm-hmm.
And I became a drug and alcohol counselor. And at one point, I had a client come in who was in the CIA. And through a series of deep soul healing treatments, he remembered some black operations that he'd been involved in. I can't really discuss those,
Right. No, that's okay.
But it was made evident to me that, there was a lot of things going on that most people didn't know about. And he told me that he had gone through a very extensive mind control program, and that's when I began to it made sense to me. I knew it resonated, and I knew that it was real what he was saying, plus he proved it to me.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the first things that happened, and then through the course of my own healing, I experienced a lot of targeting and persecution from people that had given me the mind control training.
Mm-hmm.
And, they endeavored to take away my possessions and to keep me in poverty and various things like that. So, I had to go through the process of self-empowerment at the same time that I was going through a process of healing and at the same time that I was remembering my own trauma. So it started to emerge. And then with the death of my sister, that's when it really burst forward. And because she verified on during her last 2 months of living that she witnessed everything happening to me. So it was really shocking, and then that triggered a lot more things to be released. And then soon after that, I got sick again, and I had to go through another level of transformation. So each time you have a memory bank release, it releases toxic stored energy that's been stored in your tissue and in your brain and your mind, and that has to process out of your body. So you go through a healing crisis, and I ended up getting breast cancer. Mm-hmm. And I'd already had viral meningitis, and now here I was with breast cancer. So, I had 4 very serious illnesses that almost took my life, and on top of the mind control, trauma-based mind control that I had. Mm-hmm. So, this is the depth of the programming is very traumatic. So the body is trying to restore itself, and because I had Reiki, I knew what to do.
Right.
And I also studied nutrition and meditation, and I was very spiritually based. So I began that process with myself, which unearthed more of the truth of what had happened to me and what's happening to people all over the world, too.
Right,
Solaris.
Exactly. And you said you healed yourself on a holistic level. Did you go Western with all of your illnesses?
I went totally holistic with everything.
Good for you.
And in some ways it was a blessing I didn't have any money, because if I'd had good insurance and a lot of money, who knows, I might have considered getting some chemotherapy. But because I had already been a healer and I'd already had lots of cancer patients, I had to sit down and think it over. And I thought, how can I call myself a healer if I'm going to use cut, burn, and poison? Mm-hmm. So I decided that I had to, live by my own principles. So I went completely holistic. I got healers to work on me. I went on a special diet. And I did an intensive self-healing program that included a lot of emotional and mental healing. Because cancer is an emotional wound, which most people don't understand. It's not a toxic environmental wound, although that contributes to it. Mm-hmm. Obviously, if you've been exposed to asbestos or, some other toxin like Agent Orange or something, it's going to compromise your immune system. Mm-hmm. The cancer has a lot to do with a deep emotional wound. And all of my cancer patients that I worked on, it's the same thing. There was something that they'd been holding on to, an injury that they'd been holding on to, an emotional injury they couldn't let go of. And so it festered and became a disease. Mm-hmm. And when I deal with them at an emotional level and a soul level, then is when they start to get better. And so I had to do the same thing with myself. And that's when all the trauma came up for me. All the emotional trauma really came up big time about what had been done to me and to my other loved ones. Mm-hmm. So that's how it went down.
I applaud you for going through the holistic avenue. And of course,
Thank
it does empower you on such a high level. Now, when you were brought into this mind control, I suspect you were a child. Did you have like a memory block? Was it just so traumatic that you switched off?
Yeah, it was intentionally. My programming was compartmentalization. So, I was traumatized. The same time that they're programming you mentally, they're traumatizing you. And I don't like to go into too much detail, but it's violence and rape.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the same time, you're being spoken to, and they have, I don't know if it's a spell or if it's just certain phrases or exactly how they word it, but it's a spell really, because you're saying things to a child in a formative stage. At the same time, they're being traumatized. So it's shaping thoughts in their mind, which trigger chemical reactions, which trigger the misshaping of your development.
Mm-hmm, right.
And so the brain the trauma is suppressed, and my mind had it segmented off, and I didn't remember for a long, long time. I just knew that I was really, really afraid, and also that I had an eating disorder kicked in when around 12 years old, and I also started to have migraines around 12 years old on a regular basis, and that lasted for about 22 years until I started having, really deep memories.
Mm-hmm.
So my body was trying to cope with the trauma, holding it in,
Right.
and I couldn't hold it in. I mean, I don't have any of those things anymore. I don't have any of the symptoms anymore that I once had because I've released all the trauma, and I've reintegrated my mind, body, emotions, and soul.
Excellent. Yeah.
So
that's not an easy thing to do. I'm sure it takes a lot of spiritual work and dedication. And also, when you mentioned that they're using these words to kind of hypnotically put you in a space, this was a physical person in your presence?
yes, there were people that were mind controlling me. And, and then at the same time that's happening, there's sexual abuse going on. Mm. And there's initiations that they put you through, which have to do with, whatever their dark beliefs are. They have I don't really like to explain it because I don't want to give anybody any ideas. I'm trying to dismantle this particular procedure, but I will say that what they're doing is they're traumatizing the brain stem, they're traumatizing the nervous system, and they're traumatizing the brain, so that they're trying to isolate away the amygdala and the brain stem away from the pineal gland, because if a person can reach the pineal gland, they can reach their spiritual power. So their goal is to block you completely from ever doing that. So they have certain rituals and practices that they do to you to block you from getting there. Because if they can induce enough fear in you and trauma, it freezes the tissue, Solaris. So just imagine, like maybe when you were a little kid, even like Halloween's a good example, and somebody comes around the corner and goes, boo, and you're scared and you go, ah! And you take a deep breath in. And when you're in a trauma-based ritual, what they're doing is they're traumatizing you, and you're taking a lot of sharp in-breaths that are taking in fear. So you're going, ah! While you're being traumatized. And when those breaths will seal the fear into your tissues. Right. When that happens, your body builds up trauma. And it will be stored in different parts of the body based on what the trauma is. In my case, it was more than one place in my body, and it was the brain stem, and it's the spine and the lower chakras, and my sacred chalice, which is where we keep all of our divine chi, which is in the back of, just behind the second chakra, near your reproductive organs.
Right. Yeah.
So that area gets really blocked, and really it's like a well fills up with dark energy, and then you have to. I had nonstop back pain and hip pain for years and years and years and years and years. It didn't matter how many adjustments I got, until I was able to release the trauma completely.
Right. Yeah. And what year was that when that started?
Which started
the original the original abuse started? What year were we talking about on the timeline?
It started on the day I was born.
Okay. I'm curious because, the technology that I have experienced is basically an upgrade of what they used to do, except now they're using remote satellite-driven technology to assault the brain. And they're using artificial telepathy with a live handler real time to abuse the person in verbiage, program the person, assault them remotely with tactical hardware, which is psychotronics. So now they've upgraded it to this level, and this isn't about fear-mongering, this is education. But literally, they've upgraded this level of abuse to a point where, they can abduct you without people in the room. And, of course, I've been addressing this since, 2004, but I'm interested in where you've been is really interesting because it tells me where they've gone with this abusive program. And of course, us addressing this is also putting a stop on this, because the more we know about this technology, the more we can switch it off.
Right, and you're absolutely right. I've heard about the advancements made in mind control technology. They try to say that it's over, and Stansfield Turner, the former CIA director, came out in 1977 and said that they used to mind control children, but they don't anymore. But like you can really trust the CIA, and yeah, it's going on in a more sophisticated level. And a person who's written about it is Charlotte Iserbyt. I don't know if you know who she is.
Mm-mm.
She wrote the book, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America,
Okay.
which was a bestseller in, I don't know, the 80s or something. And she talks about the programs they put in place starting way back in 1920, where they started mind controlling people really early, with things that they learned from Sigmund Freud. And I don't think he was a mind controller, but he specialized in trauma, which actually that's what psychiatry is it's trauma based. It's not helpful for anybody. And once they got a hold of certain theories of trauma, they began to develop them and develop them. And of course, this goes back probably thousands of years. Who knows what kinds of techniques they had thousands of years ago, maybe all the way back to Atlantis. And this isn't a brand new thing. It's just, the modern version of mind control. And then once with the onset of digital technology, Charlotte Iserbyt says that they developed video games specifically for the purpose of mind controlling the minds of young people, so that they would be ready to kill and whatever it is that they want them to do, at this stage of their adulthood.
Right.
So, we're moving up in that, but we're also, the old paradigm has been defeated. I want to say that to your listeners, that it's over and that their power is ended, and that we're in the process of revelation and disclosure. We're truth speaking and we're delivering the message. That's why so many of us are coming forward, like yourself and I. And we're coming forward, we're describing the programs that we went through, and we're describing how our healing went, and we're going to knock the legs out from under these people, and we're going to create a foundation for the new paradigm. That is what we're doing, so that people can come into their healing. It's time for people to come in for their healing.
I so agree with you. Yeah, well said indeed. And you're right about the old technological wars too. The Atlantean wars, always about power, manipulation, telepathy, psychic wars. And of course, that dovetails right into, like you said, what's going on the timeline. But it is imploding, and I agree with you. I think that this stuff is really just we're shining the light in all these areas, and we're just pushing this stuff out and moving and just connecting all of these mechanisms that have been designed to keep everybody entrained, controlled, manipulated. Yeah. And once again, I'm really appreciative of you of being on the show tonight. I just think it's I'm really blessed to have you on. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes. And I'm happy to be here. That's why I think that this happened to me for a reason. I don't hate the people that did this to me. I've gone through the process of forgiveness. I think this was my soul contract, Solaris, is that I volunteered for this mission, is that somebody had to be dropped down into the darkness. I was like an undercover operative. It's like, okay, I'll take notes, so I guess I have the soul power to go through it. Not everybody survives it. And I learned what it was all about. I witnessed it. And then my mother, God bless her, the good part of the story is that my mother was a spiritual healer and a teacher, and she took me through years and years of spiritual training as a child. So at the same time I was being mind controlled and traumatized, soon after that, my mother began training me to heal and to meditate and to, believe in God and all of that. And so I had 15 years at home of really profound spiritual training of some of the most powerful healers in the world, including the Grand Master of Reiki, Hawayo Takata, who was a close friend of my mother's.
Nice.
She came to our home 3 times a year to teach, where I would get lots of treatments. And so I got dozens and dozens of Reiki treatments from the Grand Master throughout my childhood, and then she attuned me to Reiki. So I was well on my way to healing by the time I was 18 years old. Awesome. And the trauma-based stuff ended. My father remained my tormentor throughout my whole life, and he pursued me. He was my handler. But the trauma-based stuff ended around somewhere between, well, the worst of it ended at 7, but then I went on into a mind training program. They were training me because I had a very high IQ to potentially be working at NASA. So I had a lot of Nazi handlers, and people were teaching me. I was taking classes in enhanced mental abilities. And that went on until I was 17 years old. I had those after school. I had to take those classes.
Wow, that's really interesting. My goodness, and you couldn't ask for a better grandmaster than Takata. That's phenomenal. That's great.
I was, well, you know what, I guess I lost my point there. What I was going to say is that I got the initiation in both the dark and the light, and I chose the light and used the light to heal the dark. So now I know how to heal the dark. They have nowhere to hide, you know. They have to step out into the light. We're going to shine the light on them. There's nowhere for them to go. You know, it's over. And there's a lot more of us than there are of them. It's a very small percentage of Earth that has that. But they've mastered this over thousands of years. So what's happening now is some of us have stepped forward who have deprogrammed themselves like I have, and we're ready to deprogram the rest of the planet. Because everybody is under a spell. We're in a collective traumatic trance here, especially in the United States. I mean, the United States is about as far down as it's ever been.
I so agree. Yeah.
It's not just the mind control. You don't have to go through what I went through. If you're watching TV, you're getting mind controlled with the Lily wave. If you're listening to music, you're getting mind controlled with the 440 kilohertz. If you're walking around outside, you're getting chemtrailed. If you're eating foods, you're getting GMO'd. And if you live in California now, you got to get vaccinated. Children have to be vaccinated 35 times before they go to kindergarten. I mean, come on. Nobody needs 35 vaccinations. So these are all attempts to destroy our divine power and to keep it for themselves. And they don't want us to awaken. They don't want us to be able to access our freedom and our power and our love. And so it's up to us to take it back. It's up to us to break it down, you know?
I agree with you. You know, the one thing is, because of my backgrounds, and it's a similar background to yours insofar as the healing work goes and the DNA activation and ascension work. And I can tell you, it seems to me like they've been trying to hijack ascension and the frequency of ascension, and almost like trying to feed off of the life force of every living being here, you know.
You just nailed it. That's exactly what they're doing. They do not want us to ascend. They're trying to hijack the energy of ascension. It's happening. They can't stop it. They're like, you know, barnacles hanging on, you know, to the side of a ship or something. And there's no stopping this process. They're not going to hijack it because a lot of us are coming together, and our collective power rises exponentially with the more and more of us who connect and who speak the truth. So there's no stopping this cosmic wave of ascension. But you know what? Darn those guys, you know? We just need to turn the rocks over and let those slimy snakes out into the light.
I agree with you. And you know, I love the fact that you're so loving and that you heal with love, because I have a little more fierceness to me. I'm more of a warrior spirit, so I'm not as nice about these guys as you are.
Well, it wasn't always, you know, it's not like I haven't gone out and, you know, sliced anybody up or anything, but I went through a period of being really, really angry because, you know, once I realized what happened to me, I was like, you know, I'm going to take somebody out here. And those thoughts that you have, but that's part of the process of healing, is that this is a great test of your soul's commitment to love and light. It's like, are you going to become like them? I mean, they just love it if you come and take one of them out, because then you're one of them and they can, you know, hang on to your shame and make you feel bad that you got hooked in and this and that. And then it's harder to ascend.
Right.
But I knew intuitively that I couldn't allow myself to go down that road, and that, you know, that I would have to come back another lifetime and I would have to relearn this lesson. So I had to make that commitment. But there's been, you know, a couple of people that have been really hard to forgive. And, you know, they committed their lives to destroying my life. So, you know, it's pretty hard to love someone like that. But then once you get to the end of it, your heart just expands to the point that's unimaginable. I mean, I reached a point of forgiveness for my father, who was a very tormented soul, who was completely enslaved and very mentally ill. So, you know, he wished to be liberated. I could see that he was wishing to be liberated and had no clue as to how to do it. Right. And that he was lost. He was fallen. And so, yeah, I encourage people to lean towards love and not revenge. There's nothing to be gained by revenge. You do have to be a warrior, though. I had to be a warrior in the early stages of Solaris because there was a lot of lawsuits and people coming after me unfairly. And it was just like, I felt like I was in the middle of like Neo, you know, in the middle of all the agents, you know, fighting them all off. And it was really exhausting. And finally, I got to the end of it. That's been over for some time.
I'm so glad. Yeah, it is. You have to kind of put that armor on and just keep your shields secured. There's no doubt. Now, was your father in the military or government?
Yes, he started out as a career military and then suddenly left and came back. And I firmly believe he was being trained in maybe DARPA, mind control, the Josef Mengele version. I had the Josef Mengele version.
Oh,
So there
geez.
may have been some injections involved. And I don't know, because I had a lot of illnesses, that I had to overcome. So they might have injected me with things. But he came out of the military and suddenly he was very wealthy. And so now I remember him receiving money. I was being sold for sex to all his old Mason friends when I was 3 years old. So, but he had 12 years in the military and he was an officer, and he was the very first American officer to be flown into Hiroshima after the dropping of the bomb because he was an architect. And he had to describe the damage to his commanding officers back in the Pentagon. So, he had a very deep history with the military. So who knows, what they're doing with those people.
Right. Well, whenever they're connected with the Pentagon, they always have, forget it. It's all over on that level.
But we never heard anything about that once he came home. So, it was like I didn't realize that he learned something there. He was just a very dark soul all the way around. He was a Mason. So it was a Masonic version of a military-style mind control technique, which was probably the earlier types that they used, years ago.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I come from a Masonic family on my mother's side, and I've always said this, there's good and bad in every division, in every Masonic lodge, and, I think at one point in the continuum they were halfway decent folks, and then somewhere it became contaminated. As with everything else, where there's power and mysticism, there's contamination or the potential to misuse whatever they have access to, and I think it got corrupted along the way.
It did, but it's been corrupted for quite a while. But, to all the Masons out there that are good, I'd like to say to you that if you're below 4th level Mason, you're most likely involved in just cover activities, good activities. They don't tell the lower Masons what the upper Masons are doing. So they don't believe it. It's a form of mind control. I've met a lot of Masons that were fathers in my community growing up, and they were nice people. Maybe they were giving scholarships and barbecues for the baseball teams and stuff like that. And these were not people who were involved in mind control. And the mind control people are at a very high level of Masonry, 30 degrees and above. I don't know about the people, in between, because I was too little to know about their levels and who did what at what level. But I know that our nation is founded on Masonic principles, and that all of our founding fathers were Masons, and that America is basically a Masonic nation. And so our legal system, our political system, our educational system, our financial system is all Masonic. And it's all about preserving money for the elite. So this plan was put in place, centuries ago before America was even founded.
Right. And did you say your father was also a Mason besides military, or no?
Yes, he was a Mason. So this was a Masonic place where I was being mind controlled. They were all Masons.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. And also, what about your blood type or your bloodline? Is it an old bloodline?
Who knows? I mean, I'm all positive.
Okay.
But the thing that's interesting about that is all the women in our family were powerful healers. So we have a strain. One of the things that I realize I'm here to do is to purify the bloodlines of abuse so that it stops with me. There's not going to be anything more after me. And because I held the fort, and I pushed the energy back and I purified the energy. And there was a lot of energy to do, and there was a lot of people coming at me. And apparently I was born with a warrior. So you talk about warriorship. I was more of a warrior when I was younger, even as a child. I stood up to them as a child and said, you're not going to take me into whatever this is you're doing. I'm not going to do it. And so there's that. And then at the same time, there's a certain sacred feminine strength that I have, like Joan of Arc. And all the women in my family are really intelligent, beautiful, and powerful. And they're all healers and shamans and mystics. And my mother was a concert pianist, and she was gorgeous, and she was really spiritual. And she channeled, and she did automatic writing, and she would go into trances and give me prophecies that came true. And, so there was a lot of spiritual power in our family that was both sides. You choose. You want it to be dark or light.
Right.
And what people need to realize is that the whole entire universe is there's no separation. We are one even with them, There's a oneness that exists here, and that we're fragmented by the experiences that we've had and by the suppression of our consciousness. But we're not really fragmented. It's an illusion. And that's the illusion we're waking up from. We need to realize that we're one, that we're all love, and that we're completely empowered. And that this is just a lie that we've been told. That's the best they can do, is deceive us. Okay, they can beat you up and they can rape you and all that stuff, but they can't take away your soul. They can't take away the truth. They can't take away your power unless you surrender. So, obviously when you're a child, you don't really know how to say, I'm not going to surrender or not. But as soon as I realized it, that's what I said. I go, I'll never surrender to any of you. Never. You can kill my body, but you'll never have my soul. You can take the shirt off my back. You'll never have my soul. So there was a warriorship when I had to fight the battle to keep my soul. And then comes the love, because you have a total personal death, as you well know. You've told me you went through it too. You lose everything and you have a death of the ego. And then all that's left is a soul and a beaming heart of love, Or you let it kill you off. And I was determined not to let it kill me.
Right. Yeah, there's something within, which of course is the immortal soul, that keeps you ascended and allows you to keep healing and moving on and ascending. You have that goddess energy too. You were talking about the sacred feminine, and what comes to mind when you describe your family and the healing background and the abilities they have. It's just like star beings, what I call star beings, star people. That we had descend onto the planet as we are enlightened star beings, that we're here, and I think you did have a purpose for being on the timeline. There's no doubt about it.
Well, this is the moment in global history where this planet ascends. This was destined for thousands of years. There's no stopping it. So some of us volunteered for the mission. We had it's just like, an undercover operative going over to a foreign country and breaking up a criminal mafia gang or something. I got assigned to this mission Earth. I'm going to break up the matrix. So I feel like Neo, on a mission here. And I know I came by choice. I know that I chose to go through these experiences, and I know that it's triggered a vast awakening for me. So how can I possibly be angry? The most important thing I can do is embrace unconditional love. That's how I've completely transcended it.
And yeah, you certainly have. Well, you're not alone. That's for darn sure. You've got a lot of all of us are here. I guess a lot of us are anyway on the timeline, busting this damn thing up. So.
I thought I was alone for a long. It's very isolating. I'm sure you relate because I had this mind control telling me I wasn't worthy and everyone's going to love you and don't ever tell and they have a suicide program built in and you got to kill yourself. And so for a long time I thought I was the only person that knew these things. I couldn't believe it that I went so long thinking that. When I finally came out with the information, it was like there's a lot of people that are talking about this. And then I saw a lot of people were being bumped off. So that was scary too, going through that process. And now I see that there's many of us coming forward. It's like a wave of light workers coming forward to liberate humanity. So it's really exciting, isn't it, Solaris?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I'm really glad your book's out there, of course, and the fact that you have it in print and documentation is very significant. And also the fact that you focus on healing and recovery, which a lot of people are so, I think we probably haven't touched base on this, but I suspect a great majority of the masses that globally are under some form of mind control, as you were kind of touching on with television, maybe not to the extent that you've been, but literally they need to be deprogrammed.
Everybody does, and I have a chapter which I almost called the book The Secret Holocaust, and I didn't think that, I thought about it, and I thought nobody's going to like that. That'll probably be a bummer of a title for people, so I ended up with Emerging from the Matrix. But I have a chapter in there. I had to cut that chapter down. I described the entire global matrix, and it was so long that my publisher asked me to cut it down, and I had a lot of references to the Nazis, which they didn't like. And I said, well, they have a lot to do with what's going on here because they perfected these techniques on the Jews in the concentration camp. So, what's happening is they figured out how to do mind control through magic spells, through chemicals, through injections, through chemtrails, through television sets, through music, radio. And now they're starting to do it in smart meters that are on the back of your houses, where they measure your electricity. That's why they're resisting the solar power movement, because the goal was to come and put these little meters inside of the smart meters, which would beam out ultra high frequency or or else L frequency, extra low frequency, which creates mind control, suppresses the mind.
Mm-hmm.
So that you can do that if you stick it in a smart meter on the back of your house and you've got everybody controlled.
Right.
So that's, there's various techniques like that they use, including fluoride in your toothpaste and your water, which is what they gave the Jews in the concentration camps right as they got off the trains.
Mm-hmm.
So fluoride is only used for mind control and mood suppression. There's no positive use for it at all. It's a pesticide byproduct.
Right.
So that's another. We've all been brainwashed to think we have to have fluoridated teeth and fluoridated water. It's ridiculous.
Exactly. Well, anything electrical can be hijacked. That's the bottom line. And coming from my spectrum of satellite-driven technology and how it interfaces with the neural circuits and how they can pull people in and triangulate them as a target. I mean, this is provable technology. I've talked to the developers on this stuff, so it's what they've used on me, and it's I know I'm very clear on the new model, so to speak, insofar as that goes. So yeah, you're right. Anything electrical can be accessed, and that means people because their brains are electrical. So and being onto it and being aware of it is one way to address it, and also taking some kind of action insofar as putting more shields up. And
Right.
securing your home. I've talked to people about certain things that they can do. Some people are into Faraday type cages, or even moving out of the location where they're bombarded. I know people who are, I can't say who they are, but they've contacted me, who are literally like prisoners in their own homes with getting bombardment with psychotronic weapons, remote directed energy weapons, and they're suffering. And this is not psychological. This is real technology.
I've had a lot of people, like yourself, talking about being remotely controlled, and people have told me that it's come through Facebook and through various online programs that have been, I guess, altered in some way that they can get to you. Now, that doesn't happen to me anymore. I'm divinely protected. Mm-hmm. And what I said, Faraday cages are great, but the real protection comes from God. What people need to do, and this isn't about my business or anything, but if you get attuned to Reiki as high a level as possible, it acts as a divine shield. It's very difficult for them to penetrate that kind of attunement at a very high spiritual level. Mm-hmm. Once I became a Reiki master, everything fell away. The worst of it fell away. And so, there's things you can do, like what you said, but you can also put up the divine, the violet flame mm-hmm. from Saint Germain. You can ask for that to be put around you every day. It's very powerful. Mm-hmm. And it's a purification shield. You can put up mirrors, mental mirrors around you so that anything that's shot at you goes back to the person that shot it. Mm-hmm. And you can give yourself, after you have second level Reiki, are you familiar with second level Reiki?
Yeah, I'm actually a master teacher in Reiki. And what's interesting is I know I was protected in 2004, very much so, by my own electromagnetic field, to a point where I actually had a really nice Merkaba signal, but they were able to triangulate and pull me in through a tear in my electromagnetic field, and they use the satellite-driven technology to do it. It's not easy, but if they really want you, I think they can. But I think you're right. I think for people who haven't been triangulated, which I don't even know how many people have had that. But I'll say I think you're right insofar as keeping yourself as fortified as possible, because the stuff that they do that's not as intrusive, that's not that kind of directed energy weapon, will probably not have any effect.
Well, absolutely, and what helped me a lot was putting the Reiki symbols over me every single day. Mm-hmm. So I just drew them in my hand and drew them over my body every single day, and that acted as a shield. And then there's, spiritual things like, I'm not advocating any particular faith, but calling in Jesus to protect you, I can't tell you enough how powerful that is, because Jesus is the one that they run from. Mm-hmm. And, I'm not a traditional Christian, but I had the experience of having Jesus come and protect me on several occasions. And I can advocate that for people, regardless of what your faith is, that if you call him, he will protect you from these things. And one thing you can do is ask him to be in your stronghold, which is inside your chakras, and he will clear the chakras for you. So do these things. These are just little tools that you can use. And, of course, get a lot of mental treatments, a lot of Reiki mental treatments from someone who knows what they're doing, not just anybody, but somebody who really knows what they're doing. Because, this is scary for people who don't understand about mind control and stuff like that. But now that I know about it, I've had lots and lots of clients. I was a drug and alcohol counselor, and a lot of my clients had been mind controlled, or they'd been intruded upon in some way, or they had entities attached to them, and Reiki cleared all that stuff off of them.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, it's really good. And there's some other techniques too. I'm sure you're familiar with them, maybe not, but the unifying the chakras, like you were talking about, clearing the chakras with Jesus or whatever symbolism that's high frequency and healing. But yeah, there's certain unifying the chakras that you can do that'll actually shield as well. And I think it's about people really taking their power back and taking the time to fortify themselves. Because I think they're so busy and distracted, it seems to me like they really don't focus on that spiritual side of shielding.
Well, a lot of people didn't realize it was necessary. And that is the reason they do it the way they do it. They do it under the radar. It's very imperceptible. It's like the frog in the boiling pot. You know, the frog decides to take a sauna with his friend in a pot that's boiling, thinking they're having a good time. And then one day it's like, wait a minute, I think it's a little too hot in here. And it's too late, you know?
I agree.
So they've been imperceptibly turning up the heat on us for decades now. And they're bold and callous enough to say it out loud. You know, I have heard, I think it was David Rockefeller said, without the cooperation of the media, or maybe it was George Bush, I think he said it, Senior, without the cooperation of the media, we couldn't have proceeded with our plans for the New World Order in the way that we have, because the American people would have resisted it. So that's why we need to keep the spotlight on them and keep the violet flame on them and keep them, you know, squirming in their slimy holes and make them come out and face the music, because ultimately they will all be held accountable.
I agree. Well, I always say there's a universal protocol, and what doesn't hit them on this timeline is going to hit them on another one. So
you're
if they
absolutely
don't clear it.
Right. It's divine law. Divine law is immutable, and what I mean is you can't skirt around divine law. You know, maybe if you're a judge in America and you've been initiated as a Mason, you can make up whatever laws you want to make, and you can be real smug and cocky about it, and that lasts just a couple of decades for you. But in reality, those kinds of actions will bring down intense karma sometimes for many lifetimes, and sometimes on your children for several generations down. So there isn't any way out. They have their brief time of being comfortable, and then they go into intense karma. Right. So divine law is divine law, and it supersedes all other law.
I so agree with you. Yeah, I call it the Roach Motel for these guys. You know, once they get in, they can't get out. So
yeah, that's one way to put it. Or I like, sometimes I say, you know, next lifetime they're a rooftop dog in Mexico.
Yeah, I don't even know if they'll get. They might just go extinct at this point in the continuum. I don't see how gracious the multiverse is with them, but yeah, I mean, to me, it's like I'm just glad I'm not on that timeline doing their evil. I prefer doing good fights.
Glad?
Yeah,
aren't you glad we're away from that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then of course there's the whole issue of who are these people, and that's a whole other show. But some of them aren't even human, you know.
Right.
So I don't even know where they came from or how convoluted their DNA is, but that's one of the things they're trying to do, is to alter our DNA, and they do that with GMOs, and they're trying to do it. The chemtrails are pretty scary because they're dropping nanoparticles that have things in them, viruses and various substances in them that can alter our DNA, and they've been blasting everybody in America with that.
Yes, they have. It's interesting, too. I was trying to figure out what other countries were getting blasted as much as Europe and the United States. It seems like they're really just slamming over here. I'm sure they're getting it elsewhere, but I don't know how things are where you are.
We do have chemtrails here, but they're definitely not as much.
Well, that's good.
I've seen a much reduced amount of chemtrails. When I left California this year, the chemtrails were all overhead every day, all day.
Yep, that's how it is here.
California is being targeted right now quite intensely with the drought, the geoengineered drought, Nestle sucking the water out. They just passed the mandatory vaccination law, so everybody, and they're going to do it for adults, so everybody's required to be vaccinated or you go to jail. And now they're going to start pumping irradiated Fukushima ocean water into the desal plants and make people drink desalinated, irradiated water throughout the state of California because we don't have any water there. It was shocking to watch what was happening to California, and I was born and raised there. Right. It's all engineered. It's engineered genocide.
Yep.
It's, you know, they want to depopulate the planet.
I agree. They want that 1%. Well, they're architects of the illusion of control and power right now, but it's just that. It's an illusion. It's part of the false matrix, and we all know the false matrix doesn't ascend. It implodes.
That's right. Thank you for putting it into perspective. It's a false illusion. And I like to go back to Neo, you know, when Morpheus was explaining to him it's not real, you know. It seems real, it feels real, and he's saying, well, can you die in the Matrix? Yes, you can die in the Matrix, but that's not who you are. Your soul is higher than that. So we have to, if we can, in our conscious state, arrive at a point of consciousness where we no longer relate to the matrix, or we're no longer connected to it, where we're always in our divine self, then we will ascend beyond the matrix.
I agree. Yeah. And it sounds like spirit or divine forces guided you to move out of California and away and off the mainland.
Well, yeah, and I lived in Hawaii for 3 years before that, and I got very strong messages. Like I was living in California, and my father passed finally, and I got a very strong message to move to Hawaii. And when I moved to Hawaii, I had another download where I had very clear information about the mind control techniques and everything that was done to me. It was I got confirmation on all levels of what had been done to me, and in a much clearer. I was healed enough to be able to see the entire depth and intensity of what happened to me. And so that download happened, and I went there to write the book.
Excellent.
So I did that. And once I got to Hawaii, I also noticed that there was a divine intervention and incredible healing took place, because it's one of the heart chakras of the planet. It's a very heart-centered place, very, very loving. And so I really healed a lot there. And then when I came back to California, everybody was really shocked, like, wow, there's something different about you. And as soon as I got to California, I knew I wasn't going to be there very long. I could feel it wasn't safe. And that doesn't mean that everybody that's there is not safe. It's just that for me to continue my work, I couldn't do it there.
I agree with you. What part were you on the Big Island or were you on Maui?
I was on Maui.
Yeah, that's where I lived after I was inducted.
Really?
Yeah. Yep.
Where'd you go?
Off around Kihei. You know where that is?
Oh, yeah, I lived in Kihei for 2 years.
Isn't that weird?
2.5 years, actually. Yeah. It's a small world. Yeah, I lived over in the west side when I first got there, but it's too far from the main part of the island. So I moved to Kihei thinking that I was going to have a lot of clients. But looking back on it, I realized I went there to heal and to write the book.
I think so, too. I think that's why I was there, too, for the most part. There's a nice buffer with the Pacific Ocean between the mainland and the Hawaiian Islands.
I know, it's great, and Maui doesn't get hit hard like the Big Island does. We had 3 hurricanes while I was there, maybe 4.
Wow.
And we didn't get much going on in Maui. It was pretty mellow.
Yeah, it's beautiful there. I still miss it. But yeah, it's very peaceful. I noticed that when I got off the plane, it's like the energetic signature, the mainland's really buzzy to me energetically. But when I get over to Maui, it's like it goes really smooth and quiet.
Oh, it does. My God, it's like the most peaceful place on earth.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad you went out there, and I'm glad you're in a good location now, too. That's good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, this is a safe zone where I'm at now, and it's a very peaceful environment here. And for some reason, there's less interference. So this is, as we emerge from the matrix and as my work emerges, this is apparently where I'm supposed to be.
Right. Well, I think it's a good place for you. And like I said, I think the mainland is really compromised right now. And honestly, I had my own, I spun it around in my head several times over about leaving the entire mainland and going someplace else too. Yeah.
Well, one other thing that's happening, I don't know if it's happening in Colorado, is the cost of housing. And, coming from the Bay Area with Google and Facebook and Microsoft there and everything, there's no more place to live. I mean, and I grew up there, and it used to be easy to find a place to live. And now it's apartments are $3,000 for 1-bedroom apartment or whatever. I mean, you can't find anything anywhere. And all the kids are moving home with their parents, and it was not affordable to live, and there are no jobs really to make enough money to pay for a rent like that. So I realized that if I were to continue my spiritual work, that I couldn't reside in California.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Yeah, you'd have to have like 12 roommates just to try to get by. It's ridiculous. It's foolish.
Yeah, and it's part of the global elite plan to stress us out to the maximum,
Yeah.
So we need to skip over their BS and continue ascending.
Absolutely, and focus on what you're here to do. And obviously you're doing that through private sessions.
I'm doing it through various different things. I've had a few private sessions, yes, and then book, of course, workshops, whatever it is the universe sends my way.
Nice.
Very different things. Yeah, it's just getting started here, so I haven't been here that long. So
it's working, though. It's moving. I can tell. All good. Yeah, you have so many wonderful gifts to share with everybody and your wisdom and experience. So yeah, this is wonderful. Like I said, I'm really appreciative of you being on tonight. It's great.
Happy to do it.
Yeah, you're wonderful. And did you ever recall having any alters within your own personality that surfaced?
Well, I would have to say I was bipolar and that I didn't remember a whole lot about what happened to me as a child. And so then I would have these really intense emotional states that would come up from time to time where I would cry and have migraines and be unable to function. So I didn't understand what it was, but looking back on it now, it's bipolar. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so obviously, I hear sometimes that some people absorb all the personalities, or if they have personalities, they absorb them. And it's my impression that they should be severed. What's your take on that?
Well, that's interesting. The process that I went through was a little bit different. It's like before I had my memories, I went through a healing process of doing a lot of inner child work.
Mm-hmm.
And in the inner child work, I discovered what you would call alters, but that were just parts of me, fragments of me, that each different fragment of me carried a different emotion. And what was interesting about it, I had a really powerful therapist at the time who was also very spiritual. He was one of the best I ever had. And, he suggested I begin that process. And so what I did was, we'd do a guided meditation and I would go searching for my parts of myself or my lost self. And so the adult Terry, which was my birth name, went searching around, and the person I found, which I didn't realize who this person was, I found a woman on the sidewalk who had been beaten unconscious, and she was bloody. And she's just laying there, and people are walking by, and this is a guided meditation I'm going through. And I thought, why is this woman here? Why doesn't anybody see her? And so I took her into the hospital, and I sat by her, and she was unconscious for a long time, and her face was swollen, and she was bloody and scabbed all over. And when she finally healed over, I could see that it was me. Mm. And because I had so much violence as a child, it was nonstop beating. Mm-hmm. Right. And so it looks like your music's playing.
We are. You're right on spot. Yeah, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Please stay tuned, everybody. Ravenstar's Witching Hour. My special guest is Salini